Ethan Moreno walked slowly along the narrow street by the river, his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. The late afternoon sun warmed the cobblestones, and the distant sound of children laughing near the marketplace drifted toward him. He had just finished a long day at the workshop, his arms sore from lifting heavy pieces of wood, but his mind was elsewhere. All day he had been replaying little moments that made him feel small: a missed promotion, the teasing from his coworkers, the awkward laughter at the tavern where he sometimes tried too hard to be funny. He shook his head and sighed. Life seemed to be moving around him while he stayed stuck in place. As he passed the cafe at the corner, Ethan caught sight of Clara Ruiz arranging pastries in the window. She worked with a quiet focus, her hands moving carefully as she lined up rows of fresh bread, croissants, and colorful tarts. She did not look up when the bell above the door jingled, but her presence seemed to glow in the warm sunlight. Ethan stopped for a moment and watched her. There was something in the way she moved, confident, calm, yet delicate, that made him pause. He realized he had been staring for a while when she finally looked up and their eyes met. For a brief second, time seemed to stand still. Ethan felt a strange warmth rise in his chest, a flutter of nervous excitement he couldn't quite explain. Ethan knew Clara was well known in the town for her independence and clear-headedness. She ran the cafe with her Aunt Rosa and handled customers with a balance of kindness and firmness. No one could sway her with flattery, and no one dared tease her without consequence. Ethan admired that about her, though he had never dared speak to her beyond the occasional polite greeting. Today, however, something inside him stirred. He wanted to do more than just watch. But before he could think further, a loud voice called out from the square. Miguel Alvarez, or Miggs as everyone called him, was leaning against a post, grinning and waving at the crowd that had gathered for the market day celebration. Miggs was the kind of man who loved to be at the center of attention, and today he had found an excuse. "Gather around," he shouted. "I have a challenge for the brave among us." His voice was loud, confident, and slightly teasing, and immediately the crowd drew closer. Children squeezed in between adults, shopkeepers paused their work, and Ethan felt the pull of curiosity. Clara straightened, watching from the edge of the crowd with cautious eyes. "Whoever dares," Miggs continued, "can win the hand of the one they admire most. That's right. If you can do what I ask, everyone will know your courage." A ripple of excitement ran through the crowd. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. The town loved a good spectacle, and this was turning into exactly that. He moved closer, trying not to appear too eager but also drawn by the energy. Miggs leaned toward the crowd, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "You see that apple?" he said, holding one up. "I will place it on someone's head. Then, if you have courage and skill, you will shoot it clean off. Hit it and you've won the heart of the one you admire." A few whistles and murmurs ran through the spectators. The words hung in the air, heavy with expectation. Ethan's first thought was disbelief. Shoot an apple off someone's head? It sounded dangerous. Ridiculous, even. He looked at Clara, who had taken a step back, her hands pressed lightly together. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held a sharp warning. She would never agree to such a stunt, would she? Before he could fully process the scene, Miggs spotted him. "Ethan, come on, don't just stand there," he called. "Prove you have what it takes." Ethan felt heat rise to his face. He hadn't wanted to be singled out, and yet there it was, all eyes on him. Some of the younger men in the crowd nudged each other, laughing, making bets, whispering about whether he would step forward or back down. His heart thumped loudly. Part of him wanted to run, to disappear into the quiet streets he had walked just moments before. Another part, the part that craved respect and admiration, whispered, "This is your chance to prove yourself." Clara's Aunt Rosa stepped forward then, placing a gentle hand on her niece's shoulder. "Be careful, Clara," she said in a low voice. "These stunts are dangerous. They are meant to entertain, not to test courage." Clara nodded, her eyes flicking to Ethan. She understood the pressure he was under, but she had no intention of being treated like a prop. Ethan's stomach knotted further as he realized that everyone in the crowd seemed to expect him to act. He tried to make a joke, hoping to lighten the moment, but his words stumbled out awkwardly and the crowd laughed, not at humor, but at his discomfort. Miggs laughed heartily. "What's the matter, Ethan? Scared?" he teased. The crowd echoed the sentiment and Ethan's face burned. He didn't like Miggs's tone. Didn't like the idea of acting out of fear or pride, but somehow he felt trapped. If he refused, he would be labeled timid, unworthy. If he agreed, he risked everything, and Clara's trust. He looked at her again. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was watching him, waiting for his choice. He felt a sudden surge of determination. Perhaps if he acted quickly, he could control the situation, protect her from others, and at the same time show courage. It was a messy thought, a mixture of bravery and foolishness. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward. The crowd erupted in cheers and claps. Clara's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't protest. Aunt Rosa's hand pressed on her arm, a silent warning, but she held her ground. Ethan's hands shook as he prepared for the moment. Miggs handed him the bow, and the apple was placed carefully on a small stand in the center of the square. Ethan raised the bow, trying to steady his breathing. The sunlight reflected off the arrowhead, and he could feel every heartbeat echoing in his ears. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second and imagined the applause, the admiration, the thrill of being the hero. Then he opened them again, and for a brief second everything else fell away. The marketplace, the people, the gossip. It was just him, the bow, and the apple. Clara stood still, her hands lightly clasped, watching without moving. Ethan's focus wavered for just a moment when he noticed a hint of worry in her eyes, and something inside him shifted. He realized that this wasn't about him proving anything anymore. It wasn't about the cheers or the jokes or the honor Miggs had promised. What mattered was her safety, her trust, and the quiet connection they had shared from afar. The bow felt heavy in his hands, the world suddenly loud with the distant clamor of the crowd. He lowered it slowly, much to the surprise of everyone. Miggs frowned, the audience murmured, and a few disappointed whispers cut through the air. Ethan stepped back, placing the bow carefully on the ground. "No," he said quietly but firmly. "I won't do it." The words startled even him. He could feel a rush of relief and fear at the same time. Clara blinked, and for a moment her mouth opened as if to speak. Then slowly she gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Aunt Rosa let out a soft sigh of relief and nodded approvingly. The crowd was silent for a heartbeat, unsure how to react. Then gradually a few voices of understanding rose. Some nodded, some murmured agreement, and the energy shifted from ridicule to something more respectful. Ethan felt a strange pride, not the kind Miggs had promised, but a quiet, honest pride in doing the right thing. He looked at Clara again. She had returned to her tasks at the cafe, but her eyes lingered on him just a little longer. It wasn't triumph or victory that glimmered there, but something warmer, something human. For the first time that day, Ethan felt the stirrings of something deeper than admiration or desire. It was respect. It was care. It was the beginning of understanding someone as a real person, not a prize to be won. As he walked home along the river, the sunset painted the water gold, and he realized that courage wasn't measured in applause or spectacle. Courage could be in quiet choices, in protecting others, in listening, and in seeing someone truly for who they were. That evening, as the town lights flickered on and the market square emptied, Ethan felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. He hadn't won a contest or made headlines, but something inside him had shifted. He knew that real connection wasn't something that could be forced or shown off. It had to be earned through patience, attention, and sincerity. And somehow, in that small, unexpected moment, he felt he had caught the very first glimpse of it. The next morning, the town felt quieter than usual. The excitement of the market and the daring stunt had faded, leaving only whispers and sideways glances. Ethan walked toward the cafe with a mixture of nerves and hope. He wanted to see Clara again, but he also wanted to make sure he approached her the right way. After yesterday, he knew that grand gestures and public displays weren't the path to her heart. This time he wanted honesty, humility, and care. Clara was already busy when he arrived, arranging chairs outside the cafe and wiping down the tables. She looked up as he approached, her expression calm, but her eyes held the weight of yesterday's events. Ethan felt a little nervous, his hands clammy. He stopped a few steps away and cleared his throat. "Good morning," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Clara nodded politely. "Morning," she replied. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened ever so slightly. That small change gave Ethan a tiny spark of courage. I just wanted to apologize," he said. "Not for what I did exactly, but for thinking that I could win your trust with a stunt. That was wrong. I was thinking of myself, not of you." Clara paused, setting down the rag she had been using. She looked at him carefully. It wasn't just about the stunt, she said. It's about how you wanted to prove yourself through danger, through show. I needed to see if you could care about more than what people thought of you. Courage isn't just in risking yourself, it's in thinking of others first. Ethan nodded, feeling the truth in her words. I understand now, he said. I was foolish to think a single act could say everything. I want to do better. I want to understand what matters to you, to truly be someone you can trust. For the first time, Clara allowed a small, genuine smile. Actions matter more than words, she said softly. I need to see that over time, not in a single dramatic moment. Ethan swallowed hard, but he felt a lightness in his chest. He had expected rejection, but instead he felt a path opening. He realized that love wasn't about proving bravery in front of everyone. It was about small, honest steps. The day passed with ordinary tasks, yet each small interaction became meaningful. Ethan helped carry baskets of fresh bread from the bakery to the cafe. Clara watched him work, noting the care he put into handling the goods. It was simple work, unremarkable to anyone else, but to Ethan it felt like a step toward something important. By afternoon, the two were arranging tables together outside the cafe. The sun was warm, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of flowers from the nearby market stalls. Ethan worked carefully, making sure every table was level. Clara couldn't help but notice his attention to detail and the quiet determination in his movements. You're taking this very seriously, she said, teasing lightly. Ethan smiled sheepishly. I guess I'm trying to show I can be responsible, he replied. Not in some dramatic, showy way. Just steady, Clara nodded. I can see that, she said. It's a good start. Over the next few days, Ethan continued to visit the cafe, helping wherever he could. He ran errands, delivered supplies, and even helped fix a small leak in the roof. Each action was unremarkable in itself, but together they built a picture of someone who was dependable and thoughtful. Clara began to notice these small gestures, realizing that he was not only sincere but also capable of patience and kindness. Meanwhile, Miggs, who had instigated the stunt, faced his own consequences. The townspeople whispered about how dangerous the dare had been. Some were angry, some worried about Clara's safety, and a few expressed disappointment at Miggs's recklessness. Ethan saw how Miggs reacted to the criticism, initially with defiance, then slowly with reflection. He realized that bravery without thought could cause harm, while courage with care could protect others. One afternoon, Clara invited Ethan to help her with a new pastry display. The two of them worked side by side, arranging colorful treats in the window. They laughed over spilled flour and shared quiet conversation, learning more about each other's lives. Clara spoke of her childhood, her dreams, and the responsibilities she carried. Ethan listened intently, asking questions and offering support, careful not to overstep. As the day drew to a close, the town square began to empty. The evening sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. Ethan and Clara stepped outside to close the cafe. The air was warm but gentle, and the river sparkled in the distance. For a moment, they stood side by side, not speaking, simply enjoying the calm. You've changed, Clara said softly, breaking the silence. Ethan looked at her, unsure what she meant. I hope so, he replied. No, she said, smiling. You've become someone I can rely on. That's different from yesterday. That's real courage. Ethan felt a wave of relief and happiness. He had learned that love and trust were built over time, through patience, respect, and consistent care. The applause and admiration from the crowd no longer mattered. What mattered was the quiet bond forming between him and Clara. The following days continued in this rhythm. Ethan proved himself through small acts of service, attentiveness, and patience. He no longer sought recognition or validation from the townspeople. His focus was on understanding Clara and building trust. Clara, in turn, began to open up, sharing stories, hopes, and little fears. Their connection deepened naturally, without pressure or spectacle. One morning, Ethan arrived to find Clara struggling to carry a heavy basket of fresh bread. He rushed to help her, and together they brought the basket inside. Thank you, she said, smiling genuinely this time. You don't have to do everything, you know. I want to, he said simply. Not because I have to, but because I want to. That afternoon, they sat outside the cafe, sharing a quiet moment. The sun warmed their faces and a soft breeze played with Clara's hair. Ethan realized that this This simple, ordinary time together was more valuable than any grand gesture he could have made. The courage he had thought he needed to show had been replaced by honesty, care, and attention. As the days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. The townspeople noticed the change in Ethan. He was no longer the restless, showy young man who sought admiration through daring acts. He had become someone steady, reliable, and thoughtful. Miggs, too, seemed to reflect on his behavior, learning the difference between reckless bravado and true courage. One evening, as the sun set over the river, Ethan and Clara closed the cafe together. They walked slowly along the cobblestone streets, their hands brushing occasionally. Ethan felt a quiet happiness, a feeling deeper than anything he had experienced before. He realized that love was not about winning someone over with daring stunts or public recognition. It was about understanding, patience, and mutual respect. Clara glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the sunset. "You've learned something important," she said softly. Ethan smiled. "I have," he admitted. "And it's because of you. You've shown me what courage really means." For the first time, they walked together without words, simply enjoying each other's presence. The town around them was calm, the market square empty and the river flowing gently in the distance. Ethan felt a sense of peace he had never known. The fear, the pressure, and the need to prove himself had all fallen away. In their place was something stronger: trust, understanding, and the beginning of real love. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Clara continued to grow closer. They shared ordinary moments, morning bread deliveries, quiet conversations, small chores, but each moment strengthened their connection. They learned to rely on each other, to communicate openly, and to respect one another's choices. One morning, Aunt Rosa, who had always watched over Clara with a careful eye, approached Ethan. "I see you've changed," she said kindly. "You're not trying to impress anyone anymore. You're just being yourself." Ethan nodded. "I realize that's the only way to be worthy of her trust." Aunt Rosa smiled and patted his shoulder. "Good. That's all anyone can ask." As summer passed, Ethan and Clara became a quiet example in the town. Their relationship showed that true courage was not about daring acts, but about honesty, care, and patience. People noticed, and slowly, the town's admiration shifted from the spectacle of bravery to the steady acts of love and responsibility. One evening, as they stood by the river after closing the cafe, Ethan took Clara's hand gently. The water shimmered under the setting sun, reflecting gold and orange hues. "I don't need to prove myself anymore," he said softly. "I just want to be with you honestly every day." Clara smiled, squeezing his hand. "And that is exactly what I want, too." They stood together in silence, the quiet river flowing beside them. It was simple, ordinary, and perfect in its own way. Ethan realized that the journey from foolish bravado to true courage had led him here, to a love built on trust, respect, and patience. No applause, no grand gestures, no daring stunts, just two people standing together, ready to face life side by side.